Welcome back to Your Lake Fork Guide. Today we got something special online, and it's going to be a how-to, in-depth how-to, just like we always do on this channel, of how I go about punching mats. You guys that have followed the channel for a long time, y'all know that I love to punch mats. I did a how-to on punching back in the late spring, May, June, somewhere in there, and we were really catching some big fish on it. Then we had some hyacinth mats and some different types of mats on fork, and we were catching some really good fish out of it. Well, we came out here to another lake in East Texas, and we had some fall mats. You know, those hyacinth mats that kind of died off on fork this year over the summer, and now we've got another lake around here that's got a lot of these hyacinth mats. And you guys might have saw the Day on the Water episode where we were with one rod, one reel, and Lunkers TV, and we started punching. We caught a lot of fish, and Rob from Lunkers, he caught a really big one, 6'10" out of it. It's a good way to go about getting a lot of bites, especially on tough days when you got bluebird skies, post-frontal situations, no wind, basically anything that's like really bad or tough for bass fishing. It just makes the mat fishing that much better. The tougher it gets, the tighter they get up under that mat, and the more fish you got in there to catch. We did some fishing today, and I caught a lot of fish on this punching rig today. We didn't get any real big ones today, but we caught a lot of solid fish, and the numbers today for punching were phenomenal. We caught a ton of them. So let me show you guys kind of what I like to use, the baits I like to use, and how I go about it. My number one bait that I'm going to use when punching is made by Lake Fork Tackle, and you'll notice all these baits are made by Lake Fork Tackle. There's other good ones out there. Reaction Innovations Sweet Beaver is probably the most popular one. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a great bait. There's a couple little things on these other baits that I like that make them a little bit different. One thing I like about Lake Fork Trophy Lures or Lake Fork Tackle is that their baits always have some type of different action. Something to intensify the action on the bait that makes it just a little bit different. When you fish a lot of high pressure lakes like we do here in Northeast Texas, you really need a bait that'll stand out and stand apart from the others. So this is the Lake Fork Tackle Flipper. And it just looks like a normal beaver bait. It's pretty standard. This is my favorite color. It's an Okeechobee swirl color. But the difference on this one is, and it comes attached, the little flippers come attached when you pull them apart. The difference on this one is, it has rudders on the back side, or on the bottom side of the flippers there. And what those rudders do is when that bait moves through the water, it will spread out. So once it goes through the mat, it's nice and tight and narrow. Once it goes through the mat, this thing will spread apart, and these legs will now kick. So the legs will flutter on the way down. Gives it a little different look than your normal beaver, where it just kind of has a dead fall to it. It catches a lot of fish too, because it's just a bait falling in their face. This one I think gets a couple more bites because it has a little bit of extra action. The other baits that I'll use at times when the bite is just super tough is I'll go to this LFT crawl tube. As you see, this bait is more of a straight line, just kind of a dead fall action. But when it sits on the bottom and you have to fish that bait really slow under that mat, these little legs on here will just kind of spread out and do a little number, and they'll kind of dance on the bottom when it's just sitting still. Just a little bit of water movement's all you need. Even as it comes to a rest with no water movement, those legs will wiggle around. So that's a really good bait that I go to when it's extremely tough bite and I'm trying to punch. The third one that I'll use, and this one is not great for really thick mats because it has this really big paddle tail. This is the Lake Fork Tackle Hyper Freak, and this has by far the most action. You can see this little thin appendage that attaches that big tail. And man, I can't explain to you, the action on this is incredible. The thump vibration is like nothing you ever fished with on a plastic. The problem is that tail will flop around and get hung up on a really thick mat. So you need some pretty sparse mats or some pretty spread out cover to punch with this right here. This thing's ideal around lily pads, or if you've just got some coontail or hydrilla that's looser, not really thick mats, it works great around that as well. And as you can see, every one of those baits I just showed you has a blue tint or color to it. It has a blue highlight. There's a black and blue, there's a watermelon blue flake, and there's an Okeechobee swirl, which is green pumpkin with some blue flakes swirled in. The reason I do that is when you're talking about these mats, most of the biggest fish that are under that mat are eating one thing, and that's bluegill or brim. Well, those tend to have a lot of blue flake to them, a lot of blue flash when they're moving through the water. That's why I use so much blue flake on those baits. The watermelon reds, your regular green pumpkins, I use those as well. My main focus when I'm punching a mat, it's dark under there, there's not a lot of light penetration, so I want a bait that has a dark tint to it and a little bit of sparkle to give it some flash. That's my main priorities on that. You can catch them on all different colors under there, but those are just my choices. On my setup, what I do is I try to find the biggest rod that I own, basically. The thickest, stoutest, heaviest action rod that I can find. This one right here is a Dobbins Champion 736, and that's a stud of a rod for flipping. I mean, it's a broomstick. It's just, you know, this is not a finesse technique in any way whatsoever. There's nothing nice about it. It's up close and personal. It's kind of like hand-to-hand combat type fishing. It's very intense. The bites are intense. The hook sets are intense. And the cover that you're trying to pull them through is really intense. So you need a big, tough, durable rod that's going to stand up to the punishment that this technique gives it. This is a great rod for it, 736. Basically, my main concern is I want something at least 7.3. I want something 7.3 all the way up to like 7.11, 8 foot, and I want it to be the stoutest rod I can get. As far as a reel, very, very, very important, always have at least 7-to-1 gear ratio reel. Probably by far, to me, in my opinion, the most important technique there is to have a high speed ratio reel. So the reason that is, number one, this game is all about getting that bait in and out of that mat as many times as possible. It's going to help you a little bit there. Number two, when you're flipping this bait, it creates a lot of slack in your line, and when that fish hits it, you need to get that slack as quick as you can. It's a big weight. That 1 ounce weight, they're not going to hold it long. They're going to feel the weight of that lead or that tungsten, and they're going to spit that bait. So it's important when they bite to get caught up to them and drill that hook. On the line, it's got to be braid. No questions asked. You never do it without braid. If you do, you're asking for trouble and heartbreak. 50-pound braid's fine. 65-pound braid's fine. That's kind of the two line sizes that I use, is either 50 or 65. I never go less, I never go more. It's usually 50 for me most of the time, just because that's easier to handle. When you're flipping and pitching, it can create some loose line in your spool. The 50-pound line doesn't want to come unwound as much as the 65 does, but if I've got really thick, heavy cover, the mats are just really, really dense, and I'm catching big fish, I'm going to go that 65, just get a little bit extra power to get that fish up and out. As far as the way I rig the bait, I'll show you guys top to bottom here. First thing is a bobber stop. You see this little black thing right here? That's a bobber stop. And it looks like this when it comes to you. It'll come on these little wires, and all you do is thread your line through this hole in the top of that wire, and then you simply grab that bobber stop and pull it up, and it'll pull right onto your line. Then you can slide it up and down your line for wherever you need it. So you put it on there, slide it up, put the rest of your gear on there, tie it, and then when you're all done with everything else, you just cinch it down like that right there. Today, we're using a 1 ounce weight. You want to use the lightest tungsten you can and consistently get through that mat. In my opinion, if it doesn't fail to go through every once in a while, you're using too heavy of a weight. I want to go with the lightest weight I can get away with, down to about a 1/2 ounce. I'm not going below 1/2 ounce. So I'll go 3/4 first. If that doesn't get through enough, I'll step up to 1 ounce. If that doesn't get through enough, I'll go to 1 1/2. If that doesn't get through enough, I'll go to 2 ounce. If I need more than 2 ounce, I gotta go to the tackle store. So I just don't fish that technique. On the hook, very important to have a big, stout, heavy hook. You know, I'm not going to go into brands. I'm tinkering around with brands. You know, I've got a few different ones that I'm using. This one right here is a 5/0 Gamakatsu Superline heavy duty hook, and it's a good hook. I like these styles. I want the traditional J hook or straight shank, whatever you want to call it. The gap where this is open, I feel like, is going to give you a much higher hookup percentage than an EWG or any other style of hook. Mainly I want it to have a really thick wire so that when I'm pulling that big fish through all that heavy cover, that hook's not going to spring out on me. Not a lot of times that you're actually going to bend the hook out, but in this situation, if you've just got him a little bit and you're pulling on all that cover with his weight, it can spring your hook if it's not a heavy wire hook. It's also important to have a very good stout keeper. You don't want that bait to be consistently slipping up and down. You're going to spend half your time getting your bait re-rigged, And like we said, it's very important to have that bait under that mat as much as possible. So that's about it as far as the gear goes. And the different baits I use, you know, it's not a real complicated technique. The colors, it's not that particular on colors. You just need big, heavy gear. You know, it's not that complicated, but you definitely want to have the right gear, because you can have your heart broken in a heartbeat doing this technique. You can lose a lot of fish. You can lose some big fish doing this if you're not set up right to do it. So make sure you get the right gear when you want to go about punching mats. And so right now I'm going to get up. I'm going to show you how I flip it, how I react to a bite. And there's a couple special tricks that you're going to need to know to have success punching. So we're going to get up and show you those right now. Okay, so you can see what we're punching today. It's primarily hyacinth. There's some old lily pad stems, old dead lily pads that have kind of gotten underneath it. Usually a 3/4 ounce will get you through just straight hyacinth, but with that undergrowth that's kind of matted up underneath there and some of these dead pads, it's made it a little bit denser. That's why we got the 1 ounce weight going. You know, as far as a retrieve or anything, there's a couple different things you can do. It's not much you can do, but there's a couple different tricks you can do. First thing that I'm going to tell you is you'll see a lot of people throw that bait way up high and punch it through. I don't like to do that unless I have to. That can help you sometimes, depending on the type of cover you're fishing. But I want to pitch that bait in there soft and low if that's going to work to get the bait through the mat. On these mats with a 1 ounce weight, it works perfect. So I'm going to take this bait right here, and I'm going to hold it right about even with my reel. And you're not going to slingshot it. You don't want to bow that rod up and put tension on it. It's really just a pendulum deal where you can even do it without holding it. You can even take the bait and just swing it. You just want that bait to swing, and when it swings out, you just let it go and it'll go out there. The holding it is just kind of to get you at a good starting point. So I'll take the bait in my hand right here, even with the reel, just swing it out there, and that bait's going to go right in. And I think that one hung up a little bit. When it hangs up, what I'll do, I'll just shake it a few times, and it'll usually find there and wiggle through right there. Okay, so now it's on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and engage my reel once I know it's on the bottom or I feel a bite. That's when I engage my reel. If you engage your reel too early before that bait goes through, then you might stop that bait before it hits the bottom. Your bites are going to come on the fall almost every single time. So if you stop that bait halfway and it's just hanging there, you're kind of messing yourself up for a good chance at a bite. So you want to make sure that you leave that reel disengaged until you know the bait's on the bottom. If it gets hung on the mat, you just want to pop it with some slack in the line and shake it, and it'll eventually, if it doesn't find a hole there, pop it forward a little bit, it'll find a hole and wiggle through. If it doesn't, then you may need to upsize your weight. As far as a retrieve, when I get it in there, most of the time, all I'm going to do is throw it in there. I'm going to let it sit for a second or two, pick it up one time, and then I'll pick it up to the very top of the mat and shake it, and let it fall just a little bit, and then I'll pull it out and get right back in there. It's important to get in and out of that mat as fast as you can. You don't want to waste any time. You're not going to get a bite right here. You're only going to get a bite when you're under that mat. So you want to get it right back on top of that mat as fast as you can. Throw it in there. Find a hole. It's hung up that time, so we're going to shake it a little bit. There, it went through that time. Okay, now I'm on the bottom. I'll engage my reel. The other thing that I'll do, and it's kind of a deal that we had going today a little bit, is when they're really active, what you can do is pull that bait up and down, and you can kind of call them in like that. If you see them chasing bait down the edge of the mat, fish blowing up on top water, a lot of times that's when this technique's going to work, because the more you shake that bait, the more it's going to draw them in. They're active, they're aggressive, they're feeding. That's when this pulling it up and down over and over again, that's when you're really going to get that technique to work. On days when they're not biting it like that, you know, you don't need to waste as much time in one spot, because they're going to bite it on that initial fall or that first hop, or they're not going to bite it at all, because they're not chasing bait, they're just reacting to something right in their face. So those are the two retrieves that I use to go about punching mats. There's really not much else you can do under there. There's not a whole lot you can make that bait do. The biggest thing, the most important thing, is to keep that bait under that mat for the highest percentage of your day that you possibly can. One more part that's very important is your hook set. You know, I talked about the gear we're using. This is a big stout rod. This is super heavy line, big stout hook. The one thing that's really important about that hook set, okay, like I said, that 1 ounce weight, they're not going to hold it long. The other factor is, with all this heavy gear, and I'm only pitching it 20-30 feet at the most. I'm not throwing it 100 feet. It's not a long cast. The bait's right there really close. It doesn't take much pressure with this kind of gear from this distance to put the hook in them good. I mean, you can bury it in there with not much pressure. So that being said, they're not going to hold it long. When I feel a bite, like right now, if I feel a bite, I'm not going to point down, reel up my slack, and then drill the hook. That's not what I'm going to do. Even if I'm way up here pulling that bait up to the top, if I feel a bite, I'm simply going to set right here as hard as I can from that spot. All I do is set the hook as hard as I can from wherever I am. I don't ever want to give that fish another second. I don't want to give him any more slack or a chance to spit that bait in any way. If I feel a bite, I'm drilling him fast as I can, and I'm going to get him up out of that mat as fast as I can. You know, I just want to keep pitching. I can't stop pitching mats. I love doing it so much. I've caught so many fish over the years doing it. Started doing it when I was a kid, fishing a lot of grass lakes like Conroe and Rayburn, and really learned as the grass died out on some of those lakes when I was younger, really learned over the years how to pick different mats apart. You know, when we started, it was all hydrilla, and now there's all different kinds of cover that you can fish doing this. From this hyacinth right here, hyacinth's probably my favorite because it's completely open underneath. You know, there's no bottom to it. It doesn't have any roots. It's just a floating plant. So it really gives the fish the most room to run around over anything else. All right, guys, that's it for punching. You know, it's a simple technique, but it's a great technique, man. It's a technique that gets numbers and big fish. As you guys will see, I'll show you a few fish that we caught from back in the spring. We caught some really big fish on it. I even caught a 10-pounder. I wasn't really punching grass, but I was flipping heavy baits, getting to the bottom of grass that wasn't quite matted, but it was growing up to the surface. I'll show you guys that 10-pounder, and there's some other big fish in this that I'll show from the spring, show some fish from the day, so you guys will get a good look at several fish catches punching mats. Awesome technique. Make sure you're doing it. Make sure you get out and learn how to do it, learn how to feel that bite, and I promise you, you won't regret it. Appreciate you watching this. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're able to learn something from it. And if you like this video, hit that thumbs up for me. If you want to see more like it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It'll notify you every time we do another one. And you can go in there and check out all my old how-tos, and hopefully we can help make you a better fisherman. I appreciate it. We'll see you guys next time. Later.